Richard Cole arrived at Riverside Academy unannounced. He wanted to surprise his daughter Maya for lunch. She'd been asking him to visit for weeks, but he'd always been too busy. Today he finally made time. He parked his Tesla in the visitor's lot and walked through the pristine hallways of the private school. The walls were lined with awards and photos of smiling white faces. Maya was one of only 3 black students in the entire 5th grade. Hello, friends. Welcome to Black Bite Stories. Before we begin today's story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our global family. Richard didn't think much about that when he enrolled her. He just wanted the best education money could buy. The tuition was $40,000 a year. The test scores were exceptional. The college placement rate was 98%. That's all that mattered to him, or so he thought. He followed the signs toward the cafeteria, his expensive shoes clicking on the polished floor. He could hear the sound of children laughing and talking. The smell of hot food drifted through the air. Richard pushed open the cafeteria doors, expecting to see his daughter sitting with friends, maybe waving at him with that bright smile she used to have. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. The cafeteria was large and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows. Long tables filled the space where children sat in groups, eating and talking. Teachers walked between the tables, monitoring the room. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked normal, except for one table in the far corner. Maya sat completely alone. While every other child in that room sat with friends, his daughter sat isolated at a small table meant for one person. Her shoulders were hunched forward. Her head was down. She looked like she was trying to disappear. Richard's heart clenched. He started walking toward her, his eyes fixed on her small frame. That's when he noticed her lunch tray. Every other child had a hot meal. Chicken tenders, mac and cheese, fresh fruit, chocolate milk. Their trays looked colorful and appetizing. Maya's tray looked like garbage. Cold sandwich with brown lettuce, bruised apple, warm juice box that had clearly been sitting out. The bread looked stale and hard. Richard's stomach twisted into knots. He watched as Maya slowly picked up her sandwich, then put it back down without taking a bite. Then he heard the voice. "Maya Cole, why aren't you eating?" Richard froze mid-step. He turned toward the voice and saw a white woman in her 30s standing near the center of the cafeteria. Her arms were crossed. Her face was stern. Her voice cut through the noise of the room like a knife. It was Mrs. Patterson, Maya's teacher. "I'm not very hungry, Mrs. Patterson." Maya's voice was so quiet Richard almost couldn't hear it. "Not hungry?" Mrs. Patterson's voice grew louder. "You're never hungry, are you? Always wasting perfectly good food while children in other countries are starving." Richard's hands clenched into fists. He watched as his daughter's head dropped even lower. Several other children stopped eating to watch. Some of them were smirking. Mrs. Patterson walked toward Maya's isolated table. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor. "You will sit there until every bite is gone. Do you understand me? I don't care if it takes all afternoon. You will learn to be grateful for what you have, but it's cold," Maya whispered. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Then you should have eaten faster," Mrs. Patterson said coldly. Richard had seen enough. He started walking again, faster this time. His footsteps were heavy and purposeful. Several teachers turned to look at him. Mrs. Patterson was still standing over Maya, glaring down at her with disgust. "Step away from my daughter." Richard's voice echoed through the cafeteria like thunder. Mrs. Patterson's head snapped up. Her eyes widened when she saw Richard Cole standing there in his expensive suit. For just a moment, fear flashed across her face. Then she smiled, that same warm professional smile she used at parent-teacher conferences. "Mr. Cole, what a wonderful surprise. I didn't know you were visiting today." Richard didn't return the smile. His eyes were cold as steel. "I said step away from her." Now, the entire cafeteria had gone silent. Every child, every teacher, every lunch worker stopped what they were doing to watch. Mrs. Patterson took a step back. her hands raised slightly. "Mr. Cole, I was simply reminding Maya about proper lunch etiquette. She has a habit of wasting food, and I don't want to hear another word from you." Richard's voice was low and dangerous. He walked past Mrs. Patterson without looking at her and knelt down beside Maya's chair. His daughter was crying now, her whole body trembling. "Maya, sweetheart, it's Daddy. Look at me." Maya lifted her head slowly. When she saw her father, a sob escaped her throat. "Daddy," she whispered like she couldn't believe he was really there. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Richard looked down at the tray of cold, disgusting food. He looked at his daughter's thin arms and the fear in her eyes. He looked at the isolated table where she sat alone every single day. And he understood everything. He had failed her. "You don't have to eat this," Richard said firmly. "You never have to eat this again." But Mrs. Patterson said, "I don't care what she said." Richard's voice was fierce. "She's wrong about everything." He stood up and gently lifted Maya into his arms. She was too light, too small for a 10-year-old. She wrapped her thin arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder, crying harder now. Richard turned to face Mrs. Patterson. She was standing a few feet away, her face tight with barely controlled anger. "Mr. Cole, you're making a scene. Maya needs to learn discipline and respect. She needs to learn that actions have consequences." "What actions?" Richard's voice cut like a blade. "What exactly has my 10-year-old daughter done to deserve this treatment?" Mrs. Patterson's jaw tightened. "She constantly disrupts class with her questions. She doesn't follow instructions properly. She needs special attention that frankly takes time away from the other students." Richard stared at her in disbelief. "You mean she asks questions? She's curious? She wants to learn?" "That's not disruption, Mrs. Patterson. That's what good students do." Mrs. Patterson's mask slipped slightly. "Well, perhaps at a different school, one more suited to her needs." The words hung in the air like poison. Richard understood immediately what she meant. A school more suited to her needs meant a school with more black children. A school where his daughter wouldn't stand out. A school where she wouldn't make people like Mrs. Patterson uncomfortable. Richard's voice dropped to a whisper, but everyone in the cafeteria could hear it. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been treating my daughter like this?" Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth to respond, but Richard cut her off. "Don't lie to me. I want the truth." "How long?" Mrs. Patterson's face flushed red. "Since the beginning of the year?" She said it like a confession. "Since September, Maya has been isolated at lunch. Since September, she's been given cold leftovers, while other children get hot meals. Since September, she's been punished for being a bright, curious black girl in a school that doesn't want her to shine." Richard looked around the cafeteria. He saw the other teachers watching, with guilty expressions. He saw the lunch workers looking down at their feet. He saw the white children staring with wide eyes. "Does anyone else see what's happening here?" Richard asked loudly. "Does anyone else see how my daughter has been treated?" Silence. Then slowly a young black lunch worker near the back raised her hand. She looked nervous but determined. "I've seen it," she said quietly. "Every day Maya gets the worst food. Every day she sits alone. And Mrs. Patterson won't let anyone sit with her. She says Maya needs to learn independence." Another voice spoke up. A young teacher Richard didn't recognize. "I've noticed it too," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought about saying something, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Richard demanded. "Afraid of losing my job," the teacher admitted. "Mrs. Patterson has been here for 15 years. She has seniority. She has influence. Nobody questions her methods." Richard's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He held Maya tighter. She was still crying into his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. He looked back at Mrs. Patterson. Her face had gone from red to pale. She knew she was caught. "Mr. Cole, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Richard interrupted. "You've been abusing my daughter for months. You've been starving her, humiliating her, isolating her. And you did it because she's black." "Don't you dare." Mrs. Patterson hissed. "Don't you dare make this about race." "Then what is it about?" Richard challenged. "Explain to me why my daughter gets cold leftovers while white children get hot meals. Explain to me why she sits alone while everyone else has friends. Explain to me why you punish her for asking questions." Mrs. Patterson's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She had no answer, because there was no answer except the truth. Richard looked at the principal, who had just entered the cafeteria, drawn by the commotion. "Principal Morrison," Richard said coldly, "I want Mrs. Patterson fired. I want a full investigation into her treatment of students, and I want answers about how this was allowed to happen in your school." Principal Morrison looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Cole, let's discuss this in my office." "There's nothing to discuss," Richard said. "My daughter is leaving this school today, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happened here." He started walking toward the exit, still carrying Maya. Every eye in that cafeteria followed him. "Mr. Cole, wait." The voice came from behind him. Richard turned to see the young black lunch worker who had spoken up earlier. She was walking toward him with tears in her eyes. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. "I recorded it," she said quietly. "I've been recording Mrs. Patterson's treatment of Maya for weeks. I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew someone needed to see it." Richard stared at her. "Why? Why did you help?" "Because I have a daughter, too," the woman said simply. "And I'd want someone to fight for her the way you're fighting for Maya." Richard felt tears burning in his eyes. "Thank you," he managed to say. "What's your name?" "Kaisha Williams," she said. "And I'm probably going to lose my job for this." "No," Richard said firmly. "You're not. You're going to testify about what you've witnessed, and I'm going to make sure you're protected." He looked at Principal Morrison. "If Ms. Williams faces any retaliation for coming forward, I will own this school by the time my lawyers are done. Do you understand me?" Principal Morrison nodded quickly, his face pale. Richard carried Maya out of the cafeteria and through the hallways. Students and teachers watched them go in stunned silence. When they reached his car, he finally set Maya down gently. She was still crying, but quieter now. "Daddy, I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry?" Richard knelt down so he was eye level with her. "Maya, you have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. This is not your fault. But Mrs. Patterson said I was bad. She said I asked too many questions. She said I was difficult." "Mrs. Patterson lied," Richard said, his voice breaking. "You are brilliant and curious and brave. You are everything a student should be. And I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening to you." "I tried to tell you," Maya said softly. "I tried to tell you I didn't want to go to school anymore. I know, baby. I know. And I should have listened. I should have paid attention." Richard pulled his daughter into his arms and held her tight. "I promise you, this is never going to happen again. I'm going to fix this." That evening, Richard sat in his home office making calls. His first call was to his lawyer, Marcus Webb. "Marcus, I need you to file a discrimination lawsuit against Riverside Academy. I want Mrs. Patterson investigated. I want depositions from every teacher and staff member. And I want this case to be so public that no school ever dares to treat a black child this way again." His second call was to the local news. By morning, the story was everywhere. Private school teacher accused of systematically abusing black student. The video footage Kaisha Williams had recorded went viral. Millions of people watched Mrs. Patterson humiliate Maya day after day. They watched her give Maya cold leftovers while serving hot meals to white children. They watched her isolate Maya and punish her for asking questions. The outrage was immediate and overwhelming. Riverside Academy was flooded with angry calls and emails. Parents pulled their children from the school. Donors withdrew their funding. The school board called an emergency meeting. Mrs. Patterson was fired within 48 hours. Principal Morrison resigned under pressure. The entire administrative structure of the school was investigated. But Richard wasn't satisfied with just destroying the people who had hurt his daughter. He wanted to build something better. 3 months later, Richard stood in front of the cameras at a press conference. Beside him was Dr. Angela Thompson, an acclaimed black educator. Together, they announced the launch of the Maya Cole Academy for Gifted Students, a new private school specifically designed to nurture and celebrate brilliant black and brown children. The school would have full scholarships available for families who couldn't afford tuition. The curriculum would center black history and achievement, and every teacher would be trained in culturally responsive education. Maya stood beside her father at the press conference, no longer the scared, isolated girl from that cafeteria. She was smiling now, confident and proud. She spoke into the microphone with a clear, strong voice. "My name is Maya Cole, and I love asking questions. I love learning new things. I love being curious. And now I'm going to go to a school where those things are celebrated, not punished." The crowd erupted in applause. That night, Richard tucked Maya into bed in their home. She was surrounded by books and art supplies and all the things that made her happy. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "thank you for fighting for me." "Always," Richard said, kissing her forehead. "I will always fight for you. And Maya, I need you to remember something. You are brilliant exactly as you are. You never need to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. You never need to be less curious, less smart, less black. You are perfect." Maya looked up at him, eyes shining. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." After leaving her room, Richard paused in the hallway, thinking about the cafeteria the day he finally saw what his daughter had endured. He had been busy, trusting, unaware of the world his black daughter faced, but he showed up. He fought back. Not just for Maya, but for every child made to feel small. His phone buzzed. A message from Keisha Williams, a photo of her in a suit outside the Maya Cole Academy. "Just accepted the Director of Student Services position. Thank you for keeping your promise." Richard smiled. He texted back immediately. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. You saved my daughter." Together they had turned a moment of cruelty into a movement of change. The Maya Cole Academy would open its doors in September with 200 students enrolled. 200 brilliant black and brown children who would never have to sit alone at lunch, who would never be punished for being smart, who would never be told they were too much or not enough, who would be celebrated exactly as they were. Richard checked on Maya one last time. She was asleep, peaceful at last. "Never again," he whispered. The next morning, a letter arrived Mrs. Patterson, threatening to sue for defamation. Richard handed it to Marcus with a cold smile. "Let her sue. Discovery will be interesting." She never filed. Instead, she fled the state, but Richard made sure her new school knew the truth. 6 months later, the Maya Cole Academy opened bright, hopeful, born from pain. Maya walked its halls smiling, no longer a victim but an inspiration. She read the plaque bearing her words and whispered to her father, "We did it." And Richard would sit in the audience, tears streaming down his face, knowing that the worst day of his life had become the catalyst for the best decision he ever made. He had shown up. He had seen the truth. He had fought back. And in doing so, he had not only saved his daughter, he had helped save hundreds of other children, too. That's what love does. It shows up. It fights. It refuses to accept injustice. It transforms pain into purpose. And it never, ever lets a child sit alone at lunch.